Welcome to Insights in History. My name is Marilyn Thompson, and I'm the Marketing Director here at the History Museum. We have been presenting Insights in History for well over 10 years, this year for the first time virtually. But we miss you, and we can't wait until you can come back. I want to thank the presenting sponsor for Insights in History, Tuesley Hall Canopa. Their generous support helps make this program possible. And now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. He is a good friend of mine, a good friend of the History Museum, the Executive Director of South Bend Civic Theater, Aaron Nichols.
Hello, I'm so happy to be joining you today. My name is Aaron Nichols from the South Bend Civic Theater. I've been the Executive Director for about 4 years. I'd just like to thank Marilyn Thompson for the opportunity to speak with all of you today. The History Museum is a wonderful partner with the South Bend Civic Theater, and we hope after the end of this extended intermission, we will be able to partner again and again in this new normal that we're all hoping to get to as soon as possible. But before we go into the Civic itself, I wanted to talk about this beautiful building that we now call home. So, as you see, it's a kind of neoclassical building, and it was built in 1916. There are 2 or 3 identical copies of this building around the United States made by the same architect. We felt so lucky to take this building over in 2005, a renovation then happening of about 18 months, and having our first season here in 2007. But before that, it had 2 other lives. In 1916, it was commissioned as a First Church of Christ Scientist congregation, and it stayed that way all the way until 1981. And in 1981, it was purchased by the Scottish Rite, our neighbor to the north. We enjoy working with them. We actually share our parking lot. That's really the only people who have ever called this building home. First Church of Christ Scientist, Scottish Rite, and now the South Bend Civic Theater. We are so happy and honored to have this beautiful historic piece of downtown South Bend, and we're continuing to invest in it every year to make sure it is a shining example of some of the best of South Bend architecture. We actually created a Fagley Plaza on our southern side, so we hope you'll join us for some of our programming outdoors this summer. We just installed a new orchestra loft inside. We're renovating room after room to make sure that we're taking good care of this treasure of South Bend. So, now that you know a little bit more about the outside of our building, let's tell you a little bit more about South Bend Civic Theater and our history. Why don't you join me inside? You know the history of the building, but let me give you some history about South Bend Civic Theater itself. We started in 1957. There were 2 Notre Dame students, Dick Robeson and Alan Powers, and the 2 of them decided that South Bend needed a civic theater, and we are all glad that they decided that, because now nearly 64 years later, we're still going strong, and that is an uninterrupted streak. We started just performing around South Bend, whether that be in basements or churches or gymnasiums, but after about 10 years, in 1968, we purchased, thanks to the city and the municipality of South Bend, the Firehouse on Portage. And many of you who are watching this remember that the Civic was at the Firehouse for quite some time, and again, uninterrupted for almost 40 years in that space. Right around 2005, 2006, we had an incredible campaign, an incredibly successful capital fundraising campaign that raised several $millions, allowing us to go into the current location here at 403 North Main. That was because of the tireless efforts of the Civic's first executive director, Jim Copens. Many of you remember him as well. And I stand on the shoulders of that magnificent man who did so much to champion this theater and allow us to be in the space that we now call home. So the very beginning, I think January 12th of 2007, we had our first season here at the South Bend Civic in its current location on Main Street. And we have been going strong. We are in what you all know is an extended intermission right now because of the pandemic. We are doing our best to pivot. We are doing our best to find ways to be safe, to bring the arts alive even when it needs to be streamed into your homes via some of the solutions we're having. But there are tens of thousands of people who are unemployed throughout this industry, and South Bend has been touched just like every other community. Our civic staff is usually 18, and right now we're at 5. At one point we were down to just me. And that is catastrophic for an organization. But because I think we're doing good work, and because our patrons, our supporters, know that we continue to do good work even in this intermission, we're okay. Is it sunny skies? No, but we're making our way through the tunnel, and I can finally see the light. And just for your enlightenment, we're going to be doing the first 4 months of the year pretty much only streaming. Then as soon as we can be outside, we're going to do a fringe festival, we're going to do an outdoor musical with our youth program, we're going to do an outdoor musical with our adults, and then we're going to try to kind of keep pivoting and decide where we are as far as vaccination, where we are as far as the numbers for the pandemic, and we'll be back to doing in-person, indoor, live theater, we hope right around August and September. So I think that's a pretty good timeline. Fauci thinks that's a good timeline. The industry thinks that's a good timeline. So if any of your friends are wondering, when's the Civic? When can I go buy a ticket and sit by my friends in row F in the Wilson Theater? Probably around August, September. But we are, I'm happy to say, still financially sound and are going to be going here into 2021 ready for what we are calling our streaming series that is starting with Tea at 5. Many of you may know Marianne Moran, and many of you may have seen the first incarnation of Tea at 5 a few years ago. But we brought this back because we thought it was smart to do small cast recordings, just so we weren't exposing more people than were strictly necessary to each other in this time where safety is our primary concern. So following that, you're going to see a show called Vincent, which again has a connection to the History Museum. That was actually premiered here in this area with Bill Svelmo, who's going to be doing that production again here in early February. So I think that's actually going to be opening in just a few days for when this recording is being shown here at the History Museum series. So we're excited about that. Honestly, history at the Civic and telling South Bend stories is incredibly important because we feel like the name of our organization is South Bend Civic Theater. So I consider that a mandate for telling civic stories and telling South Bend stories. And in the almost 4 years that I've been executive director here at the Civic, we're trying more and more to find, to discover, to amplify those civic stories right here in our backyard. And I'll give you one really great example of that that's coming down the pipe, and that is the Better Homes Project. Now, for those of you who don't know, Better Homes of South Bend is a true story of the African American community really kind of overcoming redlining and overcoming some of the hurdles that were put in front of them for land ownership, home ownership here in the city limits of South Bend. So there is a beautiful book called Better Homes of South Bend, written by IUSB professor Gabrielle Robinson, and she and an African-American playwright by the name of Colleen Jennings, who I met at an AACT, the American Association of Community Theaters conference. The two of them are working together to take the raw materials, the true story of Better Homes of South Bend, and turn that into a full-length play. And so those are the kind of ideas that I think are so important. We are also working with the, and you've heard this too from those of you who came and saw the play Heartless, we're working with the South Bend Community Reentry Center, which are currently incarcerated inmates, and we were able to start them as volunteers and then help to tell their story of overcoming the adversity and the hardship and the kind of stigma of being a felon, and how do you overcome that when you come back into society and literally come back to living in our community. So that's another example. We're working about with a project called Enough, which is about gun violence prevention in the community. So ultimately, what I do want to say to each and every one of you who is watching this is help us tell civic stories. I think like I said, we have a responsibility to, as well as entertain, to inform, inspire, uplift, all of those really important qualities that a strong community does amongst its citizens. We're going to start actually a civics course in the next few months because, those of you who have been around for a while understand that civics is something we used to learn about in school. Well, I'll tell you right now, there is no civics courses that I know of really anywhere in the state or nation. I've been asking. So somebody should be teaching that. We need to know how to be responsible citizens. We need to know how to take care of each other in our communities. And a word we don't use enough, our neighbors. And that is what we really feel the Civic Theater has a responsibility to do. So in addition to the wonderful plays, comedies, mysteries, musicals, all the things that you see day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, decade to decade here at the Civic Theater, we also want to be a part of the solution for community building, for amplifying underrepresented voices. So if you have a civic story, if you have a piece of South Bend history that maybe you think we need to be reminded of, come to me, talk to me. And yet I'm sure my contact information will be somewhere on this, but I'm going to actually give it to you right here. You can call me on my cell phone. Yes, I'm going to give that to you in a live recording, 574-333-4473, 333-4473. Just call me and come up to me with a big idea. I'd love to see that. Or you can just email me, which is aaron@sbct.org. Because the Civic Theater needs to be telling civic stories, needs to be uplifting our town. And we're positioned so well to do that because of this beautiful history that we have as an organization. Like I said, 63, 64 years of continuous operation, that's pretty impressive. And my hope is that we're around and stronger in the next 64 years. But I will say thank you for supporting arts organizations, not just the Civic, but visual theater, dance, just all the things that have been impacted in this time. Thank you for supporting us in this kind of dark and dreary time for the last year. We're okay. I hope you're okay. And I am so excited to welcome you back when it's safe to do so here at South Bend Civic Theater. So thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, like I said, just reach out. Come at me with big ideas, come at me with suggestions, and we will keep building and growing and making the South Bend Civic Theater an organization for all of South Bend. Thanks.